I was always seeking in him what I could never give to myself. And so that was the work. That was the realization that it wasn't all on him. I had created this fabricated story that I was really holding on to that was like led to the demise of my marriage. But if I look at the root of it, I did not love myself enough through that relationship.
Welcome to the Divorce Circle. Today, I'm honored to welcome Jen Murtagh, founder of Matern, an organization supporting women through key life transitions like motherhood, maternity leave, and menopause. With over 20 years of leadership experience in the corporate and nonprofit sectors, Jen is a recognized strategist, advocate for gender equity, and a heart-centered leader. She has raised millions for causes from anti-bullying to women's health and has been named one of the Business in Vancouver 40 Under 40 and is a passionate voice for women's heart health as a survivor herself. Jen also serves on multiple advisory councils and boards, continuing to mentor and inspire the next generation of women leaders. Thank you for joining us, Jen.
Hi.
How are you today?
It's an honor to be here just to chat all things.
I'm so excited to have you here today. I've followed your journey through separation and divorce and remarriage, and I'm excited to talk to you today and just talk about what it's like life after divorce and the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
So can you take us back to the time of your divorce? What was the most difficult part of the transition for you? And both like emotionally and physically and mentally.
I worried a lot about what I think a lot of parents worry about, which is about messing up your kids. If you have kids and you're going through divorce, I think there's a lot of motivation to stay in relationships that are no longer serving you because you're worried about the impact on your children.
Yes.
And that was sort of eating me up inside. We'd been in counseling for a very long time before we kind of decided to separate. But I think that was a worry that sat really heavy on my heart. How are my kids going to survive this? And what are the long-term impacts? Because I know a lot of people that stay in relationships that do it primarily because they think about it's going to be such a negative impact on their kids. So that was definitely one thing I worried about. I think one thing that was difficult is, though, I read a stat, even though they say women end 70% of marriages, that's what I've heard. And I ended mine. Like, I was the one who sort of had the courage to say, this is just not working anymore for both of us. And I think he didn't want to accept that initially, but he did come around. But I think the really hard part during that stage was, even though I ended it, he moved on much quicker. And so he met someone literally 6 weeks after I moved out. And I think that hit me harder than I expected because I kind of felt like I was just replaced.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult emotionally and mentally. Physically, I felt pretty strong. And I got deep into meditation. I reconnected with my spiritual side. I started to access a lot of tools that I hadn't been accessing through some really difficult times because I also had more space to do so because we started also sharing custody of the kids. So all of a sudden, I had more time than I was used to because I didn't have my kids full time anymore.
So when you went to that 50 or whatever shared custody, how did that feel at first? Did you go through periods of loneliness, or you're like, oh, I'm just going to go meditate now. I'm going to do all these things. Like, was there a transition of period where you're just trying to get used to not being with your kids? How did that feel?
Yeah, I think post-divorce or post-separation, there's a lot of grief, a lot of feeling of loss, especially more so not about the loss of the relationship because it wasn't in such a great state, but the loss of the life that I had imagined for myself, for my children, and with my partner at the time. And so it was hard to sit in that. Especially when all of a sudden you're sitting, I was the one that moved out. I kind of refurnished a townhouse quite close to where my ex lived just to make it easeful for the kids to move back and forth. But it was super lonely, and it was hard not to want to replace that with other things, with busyness. And so I really gave myself permission to just sort of like lay on a yoga mat and cry or read a book or really avoid just busying myself to just give myself permission to feel my feelings.
Yeah.
And it's hard to sit in that, you kind of want to skirt around it, but there's really no way around that but through it.
Yeah. Were there any pivotal moments during your divorce when you realized that you were stronger than you thought you were?
I think growing up, I have always felt like I was very self-sufficient. And I grew up by and large, with a single mother. When I was 5, my parents separated, and that was really difficult on her. So I've always been really self-reliant and really self-sufficient. I sort of navigated through a lot of my life on my own. And so I sort of always felt like I was strong. So being by myself wasn't something that scared me. And I think going through a divorce, there are a lot of moments where you question, your decisions. And you even think, oh, did I make the right decision? And so whenever I had those moments, I would just really come back to myself, to my faith. And I asked, I am a spiritual person, so I asked for a lot of guidance from God during that time, and really leaned into my circle as well. I would say my mom at the time wasn't very supportive because she's a very traditional Irish Catholic woman and didn't believe in divorce, even though she separated, but for very different reasons. It was basically if you're not being beaten or emotionally abused, why would you leave a relationship? That was sort of the old school mentality. But I really dreamed of a much bigger, bolder, braver, big love kind of life for myself. And I knew inside of that relationship that wasn't going to happen.
So how did the experience of divorce shape you as the woman you are today? How did it change you?
I think that when you get brave in one aspect of your life, so sort of coming to the realization that being inside of this relationship is no longer sort of where I'm going. It's no longer working for me for whatever a multitude of reasons are. And it's not as simple as that. We all know that. I'm making it sound simple. It's not. It's years and years. I think when you get brave in one aspect of your life, that can't help but trickle into other parts of your life. So, shortly after I went through my separation, I took on a big CEO role with a new organization, which was a big risk at the time for me. I was very safe in the position that I was in. I opened myself up to new relationships, not just with men, but with other women, people I, never seemed to have time for because I had young kids and a big career and I was sort of racing from one thing to the next. And I think I realized that, I had a lot of capacity.
Yeah.
I had a lot of capacity, during that time that I could then pour into other aspects and particularly pour into myself and my own healing.
Did you find that when you were going through your divorce that you also lost relationships and lost friendships? And how did that feel and how did you navigate that? How did that affect you personally in terms of losing those relationships?
Yeah, of course, that's inevitable, especially if you have couple friends. It, becomes challenging inside of dynamics like that. Because sometimes people think they have to choose between, one or the other. And so, yeah, our relationships definitely changed. But that is not something that, I look back and think, oh, that was a terrible thing. I think that's the continued evolution of who you are as a human. And sometimes when you also say this relationship isn't working for me, that can be triggering for other people inside of relationships that they also feel the same way, but maybe they don't have the same bravery to leave it or to choose a new path for themselves. And so that can create a lot of tension because some people think, well, I'm sticking it out. You should just stick it out. Work on it harder. Work on it more. And so, yeah, definitely lost some new relationships, but other ones blossomed at the same time. So, grateful for that and have a lot of understanding, especially looking back now about, why that happened.
I've discovered that within some of the marriage relationships that they didn't want their wife hanging out with me because I might give them some funny ideas that maybe divorce was not such a bad idea and look at how happy she is now.
Oh, totally. And I've seen that.
So they just didn't want me spending time with them and maybe putting any bad influence on their wives.
I can appreciate that. Yeah.
So is there anything that you would do differently when it comes to your divorce? If you were looking back on it now, anything you would change?
Yeah, I mean, listen, separation can be messy. I don't think we're always showing up as the best version of ourselves in those earlier days. And for me, it was quite a while ago. I can look back at that version of myself and hold a lot of compassion for her. I can look back and say, yeah, maybe you didn't handle that conversation as well as you could have. Maybe you were really triggered in that moment. And I think like the healing process and the growth kind of, for me over the last 5 to 10 years, that's what I sort of worked on, is the recognition of, oh, wow, I was really emotional. I was really triggered. I was really reactive. Not all the time, but some of the times. And so what are the parts of me that need to be worked on so I don't show up as reacting? Instead, I choose to very mindfully stay anchored into my power and choose a different way to respond. So yeah, in retrospect, there's definitely a lot of areas I could have done better, but they were all growth opportunities. And you know what? I think a lot of good happened as well. Like my ex and I really tried to maintain our kids as our North Star. We maintained a year of counseling after we separated, as co-parenting counseling, because there was still things that felt like hot and, we were both reacting. Like the same things that were triggering us inside of our relationship didn't, magically go away when we moved into a co-parenting relationship. So we decided to continue with that, to be better parents to our kids and to be a united front and really try and anchor the kids in love, because we thought that's the best way to get them through kind of this split for them. And they were quite young. They were they were 2 and 5.
2 and 5.
Yeah.
So, how did you support them? Because at 2 and 5, they're not going into therapy.
Yeah, no, they didn't really understand. I mean, my son, who's now 13, he doesn't even have any recollection of his dad and me together, which like that's what I sort of initially thought when they were young. It might be easier on them than when they're older and they're more aware and it's more difficult. We got some really good advice from our family counselor on how to coach our kids through it and what to say to them and what not to say and what questions not to answer and all of that. And so that was super helpful. So the languaging really was, Mommy and Daddy love you very much, and we're going to be living in 2 different houses now. Doesn't mean we're not a family. All families look different. We would point to John's family also live in 2 different houses. We got them books, like kids' books. That was about my room at mom's, my room at dad's. Like there are different books to help them access. I mean, a 2-year-old's pretty difficult, but my daughter who was 5 and going into kindergarten. We really had quite a fluid sort of, kind of relationship. If I couldn't get to somewhere, even though it was my day, my ex would be like, no problem, I can pick her up from dance. So we tried to keep it as harmonious as possible.
That's amazing.
And I do think that was helpful for our kids at the time. Like I said, we really kind of tried to create this North Star. I grew up inside of a marriage that split where they did not have that dynamic. And I often very much felt caught in the middle. My mother was absolutely the peacemaker. My dad was kind of a jerk. Like when I see what she went through now as a grown woman, I think, wow, I don't know how she navigated through that so well. But I didn't want to put my kids in the middle where we were triangulating with our children. So for the most part, we try and come to each other as much as possible. Even though we're 10 years out now, we still get into situations where it's like, oh, the kids are working us now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a little bit. So I don't know if they're conscious of it, but we're constantly, the 2 of us need to communicate on this, not go through the children.
Yeah, I think communication between the parents is key.
If you can do it, yeah.
Yeah. So what now as they're older, do you need to have conversations with them to make them feel safe and reassured, or this is kind of their normal? Because I heard a stat once that said that if you're thinking about divorce and separation, that if you do it before the kids are in grade 5, they're more adaptable to change before in younger
interesting.
years
Yeah.
than if once they hit those middle school years and then high school, because they're hitting their own hormones and their own friend groups, and it becomes a little more tumultuous. And then as adults, they almost feel like their childhood was a lie if the parents break up afterwards, because they don't understand what the dynamic was, or that kind of thing. So do you feel that, like, since your children were young, that they're just adapted to this as their normal? They don't know any different.
Yeah, they really adapted very well. Kids are really resilient. And I think the younger they are, there is probably a lot of brain research tied into that. Like, kids can learn languages really quickly. Like, they just seem to kind of adapt really quickly when they were younger. And, things came up. I miss daddy. I miss mommy. We'd be like, oh, let's get daddy on the phone right now. You can tell him how much you miss him. I know you miss him, honey. Like, really just sort of the emphasizing with them. And now that they're older, like, this has just been their life for the last 10 years. So they don't really know any different. And we're both remarried, right? So they now see us inside of, loving, thriving, connected relationships. And they're happy for us that we have these. And now their love circle expanded more.
Yes.
Because they have now step-parents as well.
And you're modeling an ideal relationship for them versus the relationship that maybe wasn't as ideal.
Yeah, it probably would have been a lot harder, because there probably would have been yelling and lots of negative emotions and feelings if we had stayed inside of that relationship. And I think it's important for people to see their parents happy. And I had a conversation. I had a very pivotal conversation with a girlfriend. And it was like when I was contemplating separating. And she said, Jen, I grew up with divorced parents, and I never viewed divorce as a negative thing. And I was like, oh, really? And she goes, no, like, my parents were always friendly, and my mom welcomed my dad's girlfriends, and we had family dinners together. And that like thought of that hadn't even entered my mind as a possibility. And so really kind of took the blinders off about what this could look like. Okay, maybe I'm not going to completely mess up my children for life. Maybe we can do this in a way that feels grounded in values and love and open communication. And listen, it's been that way about 75% of the time. Like 25% has been hard. But the thing is, we kind of keep coming back to it and be like, okay, how do we improve this? What are things we can do to adjust? We were just at our kids' family counselor this week together, my ex and I, talking about, okay, how do we respond to this as a united front as parents? Because different dynamics at different households.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you were to look back at yourself and say, looking back, would you want your kids to be in the same situation you were in your marriage and live that? What advice would you give them? Would it be to leave or stay? So sometimes leaving, you're modeling that. If you're staying in that relationship, you're modeling that level of relationship is completely normal. Whereas now you've given them the possibility of actually going for what they really deserve, is that big love.
Yeah.
Happiness.
Yes.
Right?
And both of us are inside of much happier relationships.
So the first marriage is kind of, I hate to say this, sort of about a practice marriage, so we say.
Well, it's hard.
It helps you to identify what you really want.
Especially you think about, people are waiting longer now, but, I was in my mid-20s when I met my ex-husband, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. As we age, we grow and change and we evolve, and what we wanted at 24 might be very different than what we want at 34 or 44. And I think, I think it's okay to make different choices at different points in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's choosing to be happy and live a fulfilling life is always good for your kids.
It always is. Someone once said to me, Jen, I know you're really angry about a lot of things, but hanging on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You're the only one that's going to hurt from that anger, because he doesn't know and he doesn't feel it, and he probably doesn't care. And I remember that sort of stuck with me. I was like, oh, yeah, I need to really surrender this, or else I'm going to harm myself, and holding on to anger just hurts everybody.
It's so funny you bring that quote up because that quote was going through my head this morning as I was
really?
preparing for this podcast. Yeah, so thank you.
I love it.
How did you find a way to forgiveness then? Forgiveness is very difficult, not only to forgive yourself, but to forgive your ex. How do you do that? And did you do that? And is that therapeutic for you?
Yeah. I mean, I believe that inside of a lot of relationships, what comes to the end of the relationship isn't on one person, like that there's 50-50. Maybe not always, and maybe that's controversial, but I think at the time for me, that was probably accurate. So first I had to work on like forgiving myself and the way I showed up inside of my relationship before I sort of worked on the forgiveness piece for my ex. I read a book by Byron Katie, and she's sort of I would say like a spiritual sort of author. And she wrote this book, The Mind, I think it was like, I'm going to butcher it, but it was like The Mind at Home with Itself or something. And I remember the thought I used to have was like, he didn't love me enough. He didn't love me enough. And she makes you ask these 4 questions. One, is it true? I could say, yeah, he didn't love me enough. He never did this. He never did this. The second is, can you absolutely know for sure that it's true? Okay, did he ever say to me, I don't really love you as much as you love me. I don't love you enough. No, he didn't. Okay, so I absolutely could not know for sure that's true. Who are you when you believe that thought? Who am I when I believe the thought he doesn't love me enough, right? And so I feel not worthy. I feel sad. I feel like I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. The 4th question is, who are you without that thought? How would you have showed up differently inside of the relationship? Probably a lot different.
Wow.
And then the final question is turn the thought around. Turn the thought around and try and create evidence for that. He did love me enough. Can I create some evidence about that? Yeah, I could. And then turn the thought completely around. I didn't love me enough. I was always seeking in him what I could never give to myself. And so that was the work. That was the realization that it wasn't all on him. I had created this fabricated story that I was really holding on to that was like led to the demise of my marriage. But if I look at the root of it, I did not love myself enough through that relationship. And I think that if I would have, and I would have showed up differently, things might have been a bit different. Maybe they would have been more harmonious. I don't think we would have ended up together, but I do think that I co-created a scenario that I came to resent. And so I had to forgive myself for that and realize, what do I want to do in the next relationship so I don't end up inside of that old story again.
So would your advice be to, I'm putting words into your mouth now. That's not fair. But would it be safe to say that when you're separating, that maybe jumping into another relationship right away is not the best idea then, to take some time to be in relationship with yourself?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think it's time to take stock about what worked inside of that relationship that you want more of, what didn't work that you absolutely don't. Like, create your hell no list and your hell yes list. Like, just like if when you leave a job, you want to be really clear about, what really served me in that, what did not, am I not inviting in again? What did I learn about myself in that process? Like, all of that work, I think you absolutely are doing yourself a big disservice if you don't lean into that work. Yeah. I read lots of books. I lit lots of candles. I journaled. I definitely created a lot more introspection in who I wanted to be moving forward in that next season of life.
I wrote a lot of lists.
Mm-hmm.
100 things I want to do before I die.
I love it.
Started in 2018, and every year seems to strike off 15 to 16 things at least a year, just organically happen. Some of them are intentional, some of them aren't. And writing, what do I want in a mate? What's important? Mm-hmm. And then realizing, who do I need to be? Who is that person looking for? And who do I need to be in order to be a partner to that person? Yeah. And finding love within myself.
That's powerful.
That I'm totally happy on my own.
Yeah.
And if I don't find that person, that I'm not I'm not half of a whole. I am whole already.
Yeah, there's no like, you complete me.
No.
Like, I completed myself and I choose to hang out with you because you're cool. I don't need you for anything
No, we don't
other
need that.
than companionship and love and fun. And, that's where I was sort of at that point where I wasn't looking for a codependent relationship or anything to complete me because I had done a lot of that work myself that just sort of realized, I just like want a great partner to do, like you said, your 100 things maybe with some of them,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce Circle podcast. Join me next time for part 2 of my conversation with Jen Murtagh. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.